Call it now. Get these people moving before the wind turns. You do not work here anymore, Mr. Doyle. This is a private event. I am going to ask you to leave the property.
There is a fire on Saddle Ridge, and it has been building all afternoon.
There is a fire on the ridge every August. You have got a room full of people who think a valet is going to bring their car around. 20 minutes. Less if the wind comes around early. After that, the only way out of Copperline is a way I would not send my worst enemy. And you know this how. Because watching that ridge was my job until you cut it. And before that, my job was jumping out of airplanes into fires exactly like the one on your hill.
The band kept playing, but Nell Hart, near the doors with a clipboard and a headset, looked up from the guest list and looked at the man in work clothes and looked back down at a personnel file still open on her tablet from the afternoon's paperwork and read a line on it twice. A fire always tells you where it is going, Emmett said, quieter now, to Voss, to the room, to nobody. The only question is whether anybody is willing to listen before it gets there. For a moment, Voss almost listened. You could see it cross his face, the doubt, and then you could see him put it away, because listening to Emmett Doyle meant undoing 3 weeks of having been right to let him go. "Show him out," Voss said, and turned back to his guests with a smile already reassembled. "Folks, ignore the excitement. Everything is under control. Please enjoy your evening." The two Blazers took Emmett by the arms, not hard, the way you move a piece of furniture that is in the way, and Emmett let them. Because there was nothing on the other end of a fight with them but a fight. He kept his eyes on the windows the whole way to the doors. Nobody in that room knew what they were looking at. That was the thing he could not fix by shouting. To them, he was the groundsman they had cut loose, the one who was always going on about brush clearance and the second gate. A nuisance line item somebody had finally trimmed. Not one of them knew that the man being walked out of their gala had once stood on a burning ridge with a radio and a crew and read a fire the way they read a wine list, and had been the best in his region at the one thing this hill was about to demand. The old badge on his belt was a strip of orange flagging tape, and he had watched that tape lift the wrong way, and he already knew how this night ended if nobody listened. He just did not yet know he was going to be the one to change the ending, because he had promised himself 14 years ago that he would never again hold 100 lives in his hands. He had broken that kind of promise once. It had cost a boy named Micah everything, and it had cost Emmett everything after. Nell Hart caught up into him on the flagstone terrace outside, where the air already smelled like a campfire nobody had lit. "Mr. Doyle," she had the tablet against her chest, "this says you were a smoke jumper, crew boss. It says 14 seasons. She said it like a sentence that would not lie flat no matter how she set it down. Why does the man who cuts the greens have 14 seasons jumping fires in his file? Because a man has to do something after, and greens are quiet. He was not looking at her. He was looking up the slope, past the last lit fairway to the black shoulder of the ridge where an orange line had begun to show. You want to be useful or you want to be surprised. Pick now, because there is not going to be time to pick later. Useful. Then answer me one thing and answer it fast. The service road. The old fire road that runs out the back of the property, around the shoulder, away from the smoke. Is the gate on it still chained? Nell's face changed. How do you know it is chained? Because I am the one who told them not to chain it. Every year for 4 years. Is it? It is chained. Mr. Price had it locked last spring. He said an open gate back there was a liability. Kids, on the cart paths, she swallowed. There is a padlock and a length of chain, and nobody knows where the key is anymore. There it is, Emmett said, soft. And it was not triumph, it was the opposite. There is the whole night in one sentence. Here was the first thing the room did not understand. And Emmett understood it the way you understand a language you grew up in. Copperline had 2 ways out. It had the front road, which ran down the canyon toward the town and tonight straight into the throat of the smoke. And it had the backfire road, which ran the other way, around the cold shoulder of the ridge, away from everything that was about to burn. One road toward the fire. One road away from it. And the one away from it was locked with a chain because an open gate was a liability, and the brush that should have been cleared 30 feet back from every fairway had been left to grow chest high, because clearing it was a line in a budget, and the man who had begged them not to do either of those things was standing on the terrace in the clothes they had paid him in. It was not bad luck that Copperline was a trap. Somebody had built the trap, one reasonable cost saving at a time, and then fired the only person who kept pointing at it. "Okay," Nell said. And her voice had gone very steady, which is what some people's voices do when they finally get scared in the right direction. Okay, what do? We do not panic a room. Panic in a room with one door is its own fire. He turned from the ridge and looked at her for the first time. How many people? Real number, not the number on the invitation. 130 guests, give or take. And the staff. Nell opened her mouth and stopped, and he watched her realize she did not have that number, because nobody had ever asked her for it. The kitchen, she said slowly. The waitstaff, valets, the line, cooks in the back, the dish crew. I do not. That is not on my list. My list is guests. Of course it is. He was already moving toward the service entrance, and she was following. A club decides who matters by who it seats and who it sends to the kitchen. The fire never reads the seating chart. So we are going to get a real number, and it is going to include every soul on this property, or we are going to lose the ones nobody bothered to count. Come on. The kitchen was a wall of heat and steam and a dozen people who had not heard a word about any fire because nobody tells the kitchen anything. Emmett found the oldest one, a line cook with burns on his forearms older than any fire on any ridge, and did not waste his authority on a speech. How many back here right now? Everybody, dish, prep, valets out front, everybody who came in a staff car. The cook looked at him, at the work clothes, at the certainty. 16, maybe 18 with the valets. Then 18, you just went on the list. Emmett turned to Nell. 130 and 18 and however many I have not found yet. That is your number. Write it on your hand. Every time we move a group, that number comes down, and it does not stop coming down until it is 0, and 0 counts the dish crew, same as it counts the man who donated the ballroom. Are we together on that? We are together on that. And that was the moment Nell Hart stopped being a girl with a clipboard and started being the second most useful person on the property. And it did not happen because Emmett guessed a number off a gauge and dazzled her. It happened because he was the only man in a building full of important people who had walked into the kitchen. Back on the terrace, the argument had found its center, and its center was a tall, silver-haired man in a beautiful suit who had not raised his voice in 20 years because he had never had to. Harlan Price, president of the board, which at Copperline meant closer to owner than not. He had come out to see what the fuss was, and Voss was already at his shoulder, and between them they had decided the fuss was Emmett. I know who you are, Price said, pleasant, when Emmett came back up onto the terrace. You are the fellow with the theories about my brush. You cost us a great deal of money with those theories, and then you cost us a little less when we stopped paying you for them. He looked at the ridge and the orange line on it without much interest. The county has not called for anything. I have a man who checks. No evacuation order for this zone. None. Orders always run behind the fire. Always. And I'm not going to be the club that stampeded 130 people down a mountain in the dark over a brush fire the professionals have in hand and then spent 5 years in court over a turned ankle. Price looked at the ridge without much interest. We stay calm. We let the firefighters do their jobs. And we keep this dignified. The county has not called it because the county does not know your back gate is chained, Emmett said. The professionals are planning around 2 roads. You have got one. Then we have got one. And we will use it in an orderly fashion if and when someone whose job it is tells us to. By then the one you have got will be gone. You do not know that. I do, actually. It is the single thing in the world I know how to do. Emmett kept his voice level, because Price was the kind of man who won every argument that got loud and lost the ones that stayed quiet. You are not wrong that panic kills people. You are right about that. A stampede down that canyon would be its own disaster, but you are solving for the wrong danger because the county has not called it, and you would rather be wrong on the side that does not get sued. That is not safety. That is a man protecting a reputation and calling it prudence. It landed, a little, and Price did the thing powerful men do when something lands. He smiled wider. Show Mr. Doyle to the parking lot, he said, the far one, and Curtis, get back inside and keep the band playing. Emmett did not go to the parking lot. He went around the side of the clubhouse into the dark, with Nell a step behind him. I is not going to call it, Emmett said, as they walked. Price, you watch him. He will wait for the county, every minute of it, because waiting is free and being wrong out loud is the one thing men like him cannot afford. He would rather lose 100 people to something nobody can pin on him than save them with a decision somebody could question later. That is an ugly thing to say about a person. It is. Watch whether it is also true. He stopped at the edge of the fairway. That is the other half of this job that nobody warns you about. You read the fire, and then you read the people who are going to stand between you and the fire, because they are just as predictable and twice as stubborn. Price is going to hide behind the county, not calling it right up until the moment it does not matter anymore. Keep your eye on him and tell me if I am wrong. Then he started doing the thing he was actually there to do, which was read the fire. He stood at the edge of the 18th fairway where the mowed grass ended and the tall dry grass began, and he held up the strip of orange tape and let it talk to him. He watched the smoke column up on the ridge, the way the top of it leaned, the way the base of it pulsed and drew in. Nell, when I tell you a thing is going to happen and then it happens, you are going to want to trust me a little more. Try to notice you are doing it because I am going to need you to trust me more than is reasonable in about 10 minutes. He did not look away from the ridge. In the next minute or two, a piece of that fire is going to throw itself out ahead of the main body, down and to the right of that big, dead oak. It is going to look like the fire teleported. It did not. The wind carried an ember a quarter mile and dropped it in grass nobody cleared. Watch the dead oak. How can you possibly know where? Because the fire always tells you where it is going. Watch. They watched, and down and to the right of the big dead oak, in grass that ran chest high because clearing it had been a line item. A new light bloomed in the dark, small and then not small, a spot fire a quarter mile ahead of the fire that made it. Nell made a sound. There it is, Emmett said. Now the bad news. That is the fire showing you it can jump, and the only road you people have runs right through the country it is about to jump into. Then we go now. The front road right now, all of them. And here is where Emmett Doyle made his mistake, the one that a better night would not have let him make, and he made it for the most human reason there is, which is that he wanted the reassuring thing to be true. The front road is our road, he said. It has to be. It is the only one that is not chained. He keyed the thought out loud, testing it, wanting it. Your man, who checks the county line. Get him. I want to know that the canyon road is still open before I put 140 people on it. Nell got him. The county liaison, a harried volunteer with a phone, read off what the phone told him. Canyon Road is open. Reported open as of a few minutes ago. No closure on the books. They are staging engines at the bottom. Open, Emmett said. He looked at the ridge, at the spot fire, at the tape, and every one of them told him a different thing than the phone did, and he listened to the phone, because the phone was easier. All right, then that is the plan. We move them down the canyon road, calm, in groups, staff mixed in with guests so nobody gets left, and we do it now while it is still open. You are sure? The county says it is open. You do not sound like a man who believes the county. The county has better information than a piece of tape, Nell. He said it, and even as he said it, he heard the shape of the sentence, and the shape of it was familiar, and he did not yet know why. And he would know why in about 6 minutes, and it would nearly break him. Move them, front road, go. They moved them. It went better than it had any right to because Nell was good and because Emmett gave her the one thing a frightened crowd needs, which is a person who seems to know the order things go in. Guests and staff, mixed, in groups, down toward the front road and the canyon. Evelyn Cross went in the first group, in her chair, because Emmett had learned a long time ago that you move the ones who move slowest while you still have room and light and a plan, not at the end when you have none of those things. And then 6 minutes later, the wind came around early, the way it does in that country when the day gives up its heat all at once. And it came around out of the north, and it put its shoulder into the fire and pushed, and the fire did what Emmett's tape had been trying to tell him it would do. And it reached across the canyon road in a single leaning wall of ember and light, a quarter mile below the clubhouse, exactly where he had just sent the first of his people. The radio Nell had scavenged came alive with a voice from the front of the column, high and cracking. The road is not open. There is fire across the road. We cannot get through. We are turning around. We are coming back. Emmett stood very still on the 18th fairway with the orange tape dead in his hand. He had done it again. He had a piece of the world in his own 2 hands telling him the truth, the tape, the smoke, the spot fire, all of it. And a voice with a clipboard and a title had told him something easier, and he had listened to the title. He had done the exact thing. The exact thing. Emmett. Nell had a hand on his arm. She did not know what she was looking at, but she knew a man going somewhere bad when she saw one. Emmett, they are coming back. You said move them, and now they are coming back, and I need the next thing. What is the next thing? He looked at her. He looked at the orange tape. 14 years ago, he had tied a strip exactly like it to a dead snag to mark a line he had been ordered to hold, a line that protected a row of vacation houses, and the wind had come around early that day too. And he had trusted the order over the tape, and a 19-year-old named Micah had died on the wrong side of that line while Emmett shouted into a radio that no longer mattered. The next thing, Emmett said, and something in his voice came back from a long way off, is that I stopped listening to the phone. I should never have listened to the phone. A fire always tells you where it is going. The only question is whether anybody is willing to listen before it gets there, and I let a phone talk me out of listening, and I have done that exact thing before, and it cost more than a road. He closed his hand around the tape. We are not running anymore. You cannot outrun this. We are going to do the other thing. What other thing? We are going to make a place the fire cannot come, and we are going to stand in it while it goes by. If you have never seen it, it sounds insane, and Nell's face said it sounded insane. You do not stand still in front of a wildfire. Every animal in you says run. But Emmett Doyle had spent 14 seasons learning the thing the animal does not know, which is that there are places a fire will not burn because there is nothing there for it to eat, and the trick of surviving the worst of it is not speed. It is choosing that place and getting to it and trusting it while everything in you screams. The 18th, he said, already moving, pulling her with him, raising his voice now for the first time, all night, because now was the time for it. The 18th fairway and the pond. Widest green space on the property, mowed low, and it sits on irrigated ground. Everybody comes back up. Everybody comes to the pond. Nell, you are going to run the count, and you are going to run the water, because I cannot do both, and I am going to trust you with the half I cannot hold. Tell me the water. Curtis Voss knows the irrigation. The valves that feed the 18th run off the pond pumps. And you want them open. Every head on that fairway. I want the ground and the grass soaked because wet ground is ground the fire has to work for. He pointed her toward the pump house. Find Voss. Tell him Emmett Doyle says open the 18th and do not argue. And if he argues, tell him the man he cut is about to owe him 140 lives, and he can start paying by turning a valve. She went. And here is the thing about Curtis Voss, the surface of the man that everyone took for the whole of him. He found Nell before she found him, because he had been standing at the edge of the terrace for 6 minutes watching the fire cross the canyon road exactly when the groundsman said it would, and something in him that had spent 3 weeks being sure had come loose. He said the road would go, Voss said. I heard the radio. He said it an hour ago, and I walked him to the door. He was already moving toward the pump house, keys out, hands not quite steady. The 18th, the pumps. Tell him it is open. Tell him. He stopped. 1 second, a man, stepping off a ledge he had stood on his whole career. Tell him I am sorry it took a fire. The crowd came back up the hill wrong, the way crowds come back when the way out has turned into a wall. On the edge of the thing that gets people killed faster than any fire, which is the stampede. And Emmett Doyle walked down into them, one man in the wrong clothes, and did the only thing that stops a panic, which is to be the calmest object in the field of view. This way, up to the pond. You are not running from it now, you are walking to the one place it cannot follow. Walk, you, sir. Take her arm, walk. He did not shout it. He pitched it low and certain, and he repeated it and repeated it the same 4 or 5 sentences until the sentences became a handrail people could hold. Up to the pond, staff too, all of you. You are not last. There is no last tonight. Up to the pond, walk. One man would not have it. A big man in a good jacket, car keys already in his fist, planted himself against the current of people and pointed back down the hill. My car is right there. I am not walking to a pond to wait for a fire. I am driving down the road like a sane person. The road is gone, Emmett said. It closed 6 minutes ago with fire across it. You would be driving to the one place on this mountain I know for a fact will kill you. You do not get to tell me where to go. You are the lawn guy. Tonight I am the only person here who has done this before. And you are welcome to bet your life against that, but you do not get to bet theirs. Emmett did not move closer, and he did not lift his voice at all, which unsettled the man more than shouting would have. So here is the truth. If you get in that car and drive down that road, I cannot stop you, but every second you stand here arguing, you are a rock in a river of frightened people, and the ones behind you cannot get past. So make your choice and make it now. Go die alone down the road or walk to the water with the rest of us. Either way, step out of their way. For a second, the man's jaw worked. Then he looked at the faces stacked up behind him, and something in him folded, and he put the keys in his pocket and took an older woman's elbow and walked her up toward the pond, and did not look back at his car again. That is the whole trick of a crowd, Emmett said low to Nell as they moved. You do not have to win the argument. You just have to give the scared part of them a door that is easier than panic. Keep them walking. Evelyn Cross's chair had a wheel off the path in the soft grass, and 2 guests were trying to lift the whole thing and getting nowhere, and Emmett got there and did not lift it. Do not lift. Tip it back on the big wheels and roll. Mrs. Cross, you are going to feel like you are going over backward, and you are not. I have got the handles. We are going to the pond. You are going to have the best seat on the property. Young man, Evelyn said, with the flat steadiness of a woman who had buried a great deal and was not going to start screaming. Now, I have been a member of this club for 50 years, and I have never once been to the pond. Then you are overdue. He got her rolling, and behind him, Up on the terrace, Harlan Price watched 140 people flow the wrong way, away from the road, toward the water and the low grass and the man he had fired, and Harlan Price did the thing he had done his whole life, which was to be certain, in a beautiful suit. "Curtis, what are you doing at that pump house?" "Curtis," he came down off the terrace. "Nobody authorized flooding the 18th. That is the tournament green. And nobody is authorizing anything that man says. He does not work here. This is still my club, and the county has still not called for one single thing." That was when Emmett came back up from the pond for the last piece, and the last piece was the one that had a price on it. And he laid it out fast and plain to the two people who had to help him carry it, Nell and Voss, with Price talking over all of them. "Here is where we are," Emmett said. "The front is coming down the slope faster than people can be moved. I have got most of them on the wet ground. But the wet ground alone does not do it. When that front hits the tall grass at the top of the 18th, it is going to throw heat and ember right down onto the crowd, and wet grass buys you a lot, but it does not buy you that." "So what buys us that?" Nell said. "We burn it first," he said it flat. "We light a line at the top of the fairway right now, and we let it burn uphill toward the fire, into the fire, so that by the time the front gets here, the fuel in front of us is already gone. Black ground. You cannot burn black ground twice. It is the oldest trick there is, and it is the only one left." "You want to light a fire," Price said, "on my course, to fight a fire." "I want to light a fire on your course to keep your members off the coroner's list." "Yes. And where does your little fire go once you have lit it, genius? Where does it go?" "Some of it goes uphill into the main fire, which is the point, and some of it, when the wind pushes back, takes the clubhouse." Emmett looked at him. "It takes the clubhouse, Harlan, the 100-year-old clubhouse, and the pro shop and the cart barn and most of the front 9. You are out of your mind. I am not going to stand here and tell you it does not, because the last time I lied to a man about which way a fire would go, I spent 14 years paying for it. It takes the building, and it saves the people standing in it." He held Price's eyes. "That is the trade. There is not another one. I have looked." For 1 second, even Price was quiet. Then he stepped in front of the fusee in Emmett's hand, this silver-haired man in his beautiful suit, and put his body between the flame and the grass. "No," Price said. "You will not burn my clubhouse down on a theory. The county has not ordered an evacuation. There are firefighters at the bottom of this hill whose job this is. You are a groundskeeper I fired for insubordination, and I am not going to let you torch 100 years of this club because you have decided you are still jumping out of airplanes. Put it out. That is not a request. This is my property." And there it was, the whole of it, one certain man standing between a flame and the thing that would save everyone, protecting a building with his body because a building was the thing he knew how to value. Emmett did not shove him. He had shoved the world once on a burning ridge and lost. He looked past Price at Curtis Voss. "Curtis, you have got about 40 seconds to decide who you work for, him or them." He tipped his head at the crowd on the wet grass, the guests and the dish crew, and Evelyn Cross in her chair at the edge of the pond. "He signs your check. They are going to be dead in 6 minutes if that line does not get lit. Only one of those facts is going to matter to you tomorrow. Pick the one you can live with." Curtis Voss looked at Harlan Price, the man who had made his career, and Curtis Voss looked at the wet fairway full of people, and Curtis Voss, who had spent his whole life keeping the band playing, stepped forward and took Harlan Price gently by both arms and moved him out of the way. "Harlan," he said, "you are going to want to have been standing over here. Trust me, for once in your life, be somewhere else. Curtis, if you let him do this, you are finished at this club. You will never—" "I know," Voss said, and did not let go, and did not move him back. "Light it, Mr. Doyle." "Wait." Nell had the number on her hand, and her voice cut through everything. "Emmett, the last group is not up yet. The dish crew, the 2 valets, the busboy who ran back for Mrs. Cross's oxygen, 5 of them. They are still crossing the top of the 18th. She pointed into the dark at the top of the fairway. "They are on the wrong side of where you are about to light." And there was the choice, the real one, with a price on both ends and no clean way to pay it. "If I light now," Emmett said, slow, "the window is still open, the line catches, and everyone on this wet ground lives. And those 5 are outside the black when the front comes over. And if you wait for them, then the window closes on its own. The front gets here before my line has time to eat the fuel. The backfire does nothing, and I lose all of it. 140 people, them included." He looked at the 5 moving shapes at the top of the hill, and then at the crowd packed onto the wet grass behind him, and Nell watched him stand in exactly the place he had stood 14 years ago. One group against the many. The arithmetic that killed a boy. "So which one?" Nell's jaw was tight. "Tell me, and I will do it. I will run whichever one you say." "Neither, not tonight." He said it like a man setting down something heavy he had carried a long way. "I light the line so the many are safe, and then I go into the gap and I bring the 5 out myself before it seals. You run the water and you run the count and you do not wait on me. If it comes to it, you get that number to 0 without me and you do not feel bad about it. That is not a plan. That is you walking into your own fire. It is the only version where nobody has to be the one against the many. He put a hand on her shoulder once. Last time I sat behind a radio and let the math win, and a boy paid it. Not tonight. Run your water. Emmett went down on his knee at the top of the fairway with the tape up in his fingers, one last time, reading the wind. Because the whole thing turned on the wind, and the wind was the one thing he could not order. The tape lifted and steadied and lay over in the direction he needed, the fresh north push that would carry his line up into the main fire and hold the backlash off the crowd long enough. The same orange tape he had tied to a dead snag 14 years ago to mark a line that killed a boy. Now it read him a wind that would save a room. A fire always tells you where it is going, Emmett said, to the tape, to Micah, to the whole long dark of the last 14 years. The only question is whether anybody is willing to listen before it gets there. I am listening now. He lit the line. It caught in the chest-high grass and ran uphill, a wall of his own making rising to meet the wall coming down, and the heat of it pushed everyone back toward the water. And for 90 seconds, it was the most frightening thing any of those 140 people had ever stood near, a fire lit on purpose between them and the sky. And then the two fires met at the top of the fairway with a low, tearing roar you felt in the breastbone. And there was nothing left up there for either of them to eat, and the front, arriving, found black ground where its dinner should have been, and it split and went around, the way water goes around a stone. The count was not 0, and Emmett had known it would not be, because the 5 were still out there on the far side of the line he had just lit, exactly where Nell had said they would be. The dish crew and the 2 valets and the busboy with the oxygen bottle, with a wall of Emmett's own fire between them and the water. And Emmett Doyle did the thing he had told Nell he would do 30 seconds before. The thing most men promise and do not do. He did not do it from behind a radio this time. I went into the gap himself. I went through the thin part of his own line where it had not yet fully caught, into the black and the heat on the far side. And he got to the dish crew and the valets and the busboy with the oxygen bottle. And he did not give a speech. He gave the 4 words that were the whole of everything he knew. Follow me, move now. And he brought them back through the closing gap in the line, through the one place it had not yet sealed, out onto the wet ground. The busboy first because the busboy was youngest, the way you send the youngest through first, the way he had failed to do once, and the gap sealed behind the last of them with a sound like a door, and the count, when Nell got to it, shaking, was 0. Every soul on the property was on the wet grass at the edge of the pond when the front came down the 18th fairway and found no fairway, only black, and went around them on both sides, close enough to read by, and passed. The clubhouse went up behind them, 100 years of it. You could not watch it. It stood in its own light for a while, every window a square of fire, and then the roof let go, and Harlan Price watched the thing he had put his body in front of a flame to protect burn to its footings anyway, because the fire had never once cared which building he valued, and Curtis Voss stood next to him and did not say a word, which from Voss was a kind of mercy. Nell found Emmett sitting at the edge of the pond with his forearms on his knees and the orange tape still in one fist, watching the black hill where his fire and the big fire had become the same cooling thing. You went into it, she said. She was not quite crying. You lit the line and then the last group was on the wrong side and you went into your own fire to get them. Why did you not send somebody younger? Why you? So Emmett Doyle told her what had actually happened, the names and the year and the exact wrong call, because she had run the water and the count and earned every word of it, and because he could not carry it into one more fire. 14 years ago, I was a crew boss on a fire in the high country, he said, and there was a row of vacation houses, big ones, the kind that get built where houses should not be. And they told you to save them. A man over the radio told me to hold a line for them, a good man, a tired man, with more feel for the value of those houses than the sense to be scared. He turned the tape over in his fingers. And my gut said the wind was about to come around and we needed to be off that line and in the black. But you held it. I had a 19-year-old named Micah on my crew. First season, and I looked at that line and I did the arithmetic. The houses were worth a lot. The line would probably hold. His voice went flat. Probably. So I held it. I chose the houses. I told myself I was following orders and doing the math, and both of those were true. And both of those were how I decided a boy was a risk worth running to save a rich man's second home. Nell did not say anything. The wind came around early, same as tonight, and we ran for the black, and most of us made it, and Micah did not, and the houses burned down anyway 2 hours later when the fire came back around, so it was all of it for nothing, every bit of it, the whole trade. His voice did not rise. It got very exact. I put in my papers that season. I could not stand at the head of a crew and hold their lives in my hands after that, because I had proven what I would trade them for. So I found the quietest thing I could find. I cut grass. I watched a ridge. And I told myself I would never again be the man who decides who is worth the risk. But you did decide tonight, Nell said. You went into the gap for the dish crew. I did, he looked at the Black Hill, and that is the first time in 14 years the arithmetic came out the other way. Micah taught me that. It just took me this long, and it took losing that. He nodded at the burning footings of the clubhouse. It turns out I could hold 140 lives after all. I just had to stop protecting the building first. By the time the county engines finally got up the front road, an hour later than a chained gate had cost them, the worst of it was over, and there was nothing for them to do but wet down a black hill and stare at 140 people alive on a golf course who had no business being alive, and a clubhouse that was gone, and a groundskeeper nobody could quite place who kept being pointed at. An investigation would come, and it would find things. A chained fire gate with a padlock and no key, and a board president's signature on the order to lock it. 4 years of memos in Emmett Doyle's own hand begging for brush clearance, every one of them stamped and ignored. All of it would make its way into a report, and the report would end Harlan Price the slow bureaucratic way that such things end men like him. Not with handcuffs, but with a resignation and a very quiet settlement, which for a man who had spent his whole life being certain in a beautiful suit was its own kind of ash. But that came later. What happened at the pond was smaller. Evelyn Cross, in her chair at the water's edge, caught Emmett's sleeve as he passed. 50 years, she said, and you were right. I never had been to the pond. She looked at the Black Hill, at the place her clubhouse had been. It is a better view than they ever let us have. All that money, and they built us a room with no windows and pointed it away from the water. She patted his hand once. Thank you for the seat, young man. And the dish crew, and the valets. And the busboy, who had gone back for an old woman's oxygen, stood in a loose knot a little apart, the way the uncounted always stand a little apart. And one of them, the old line cook with the burns on his arms, came over and did not say thank you, because thank you was too small, and instead said, you came in the kitchen, like it was the strangest and best thing that had happened all night. Nobody comes in the kitchen. The fire never asked who was a guest and who washed the dishes, Emmett said. Neither did I. Not tonight. Dawn came up gray and smelled like the end of the world and looked, in the flat early light, almost peaceful. A black hill and a black footprint where a clubhouse had been and 140 people asleep or staring on the grass, all of them breathing, every single one. Emmett Doyle walked the black at first light, alone, the way he used to walk a fire the morning after, reading what it had done. He did not go to the ruins of the clubhouse. He went up to the top of the 18th, to the black ground where his line had met the big fire, the ground that had held. I took the orange tape off his belt. He looked at it a long time, the faded strip of it, 14 years old, the marker of the worst line he had ever held, and now the reader of the wind that had saved 140 people on the one night he finally chose the people over the building. He tied it to a burned snag at the top of the hill, the way he had tied one once to mark a line that killed a boy, except this time it did not mark a line. It just marked a place where, for once, he had gotten it right, 14 years too late to do Micah any good, and exactly in time to do everyone else some. He did not get his old life back. Nobody offered it, and he would not have taken it. The club that had cut him was a black footprint now, and the career that had broken him was 14 years gone. And neither of those things was coming back, and he found, standing on the black hill in the gray light, that he did not need them to. He got into his old truck. It was the one thing on the property that still ran. And Emmett Doyle drove down the front road, past the county engines and the exhausted crews and the place where the fire had crossed and gone out, down off the hill into an ordinary morning, carrying the one thing the club had never bothered to count and had needed more than anything on its books, which he had finally, on a burning hill at 58 years old, learned how to put down.